Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining this evening for the first part of the Regional Food Conference for South West Wales. We've been planning this conference for a few months, so we're really excited to finally be able to get together and have what we hope is going to be a really engaging, interactive and productive discussion about the future of our regional food system and what we can all do towards a healthier, more sustainable, more resilient, more equal, more nutritious regional food system. I'm going to start by playing a little introductory video. So rather than have a load of speakers joining us this evening, we've tried to make as much space for discussion as we possibly can. So what that means is that we hosted a roundtable discussion with a number of experts and thought leaders in the run-up to tonight's event. What we've done is try and pull out some key talking points from that into a little intro video.
Farming has always faced change and there are always challenges. Two of the main ones is climate change, undoubtedly, and of course the rising population growth is significant here.
You know, engaging with the farming community is absolutely probably the most important thing that we can do here. We need to make sure that conversation is really strong, because too often those conversations take place in isolation, and we need those conversations to take place with everybody present.
We should at least think about how much of our food we want to import. I think we should at least consider it. And once, of course, when you've asked that, you then have to look at land use, because you have to see how much land you've got to grow it.
To really make tangible steps, there needs to be a recognition of how these policies integrate at a national level. It really does need that national vision and direction, but it also needs that local level vision and action, and that needs to not just come from policymakers, but it also needs to come from the ground up.
We kind of demonstrated how the localised food systems did actually work in the pandemic, when people didn't want to go to the supermarkets, or the supermarkets were running low of stock.
Farmers, there's not a farmer in Wales, I don't think, that in their hearts would not want to switch to more regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices.
And I firmly hope that young people see agriculture and primary food production, and also further stages down the supply chain, that they will get involved in this industry, because it's a marvellous, the future potential is great.
We need to increase the diversity on the supply side in Wales of what we produce, and also what we turn it into. So we need more secondary produce as well.
Is there an opportunity to align what we're producing in Wales with what would be more of a kind of potentially climate-friendly diet?
If we take the government at their word and say, OK, right, let's have a community food strategy, then that's when we can really call on the power of the community to change things. And there's a lot of energy at grassroots. You naturally integrate things more. It's harder to have that silo thinking, because the food that we do locally cuts across all parts of our lives.
Once we get to that position of making sure that the public procurement really brings in local food systems and producers, and involves companies all around this country who can organise that distribution to cut out the waste, unnecessary processing that goes on with food sometimes.
There is an awful lot of really exciting activity that is happening in the grounds in communities, and I think, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do as an organisation is try to bring some of those stories to life, and to actually tell those stories and experiences that people are having.
By going out, you know, volunteering at your local allotment, or just growing some herbs in the windowsill, you're just making a little statement. No, actually, this is what I believe in.
I think Wales could lead the world in relocalising its food systems, because we have a unique combination of a government that has a lot of empathy with the challenges and the opportunity of farmers to transition towards more regenerative farming systems, and willing to put their principles into practice and redirect the funding after Brexit.
I hope you agree that's a sort of useful context setting video that summarises some of the key talking points. I'm sure many of those we can expand upon as this evening goes on, and there are many other things that weren't mentioned there that I'm hoping many of you from across the region we'll mention. Christine, hi.
Hi, Dawn.
Why does today feel important to you? Lovely to see you again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a grower or a distributor, but I'm passionate that my food is fresh, that I know where it's come from, that I know it's local, that I know it's not full of chemicals and pesticides and additives and all the things I don't want to put into my body. Passionate about animal welfare too, really concerned about animals being shipped halfway around the world when we don't need that to happen at all, and it shouldn't be happening.
I'm here because I co-host, if you like, the Food Network in Carmarthenshire, and there's much more to it than that. So what we're trying to do is actually, you know, from the land to the plate. So I was really, really heartened to hear somebody say, and I can't remember who it was, Wales could be the first nation in the world to produce local food and have it distributed. What a fantastic way to actually move forward, to actually know where your food comes from. And like I echo what Christine says as well. Thanks very much for putting this on as well. It's great to see so many people.
As a public health nutritionist, I'm very concerned about reducing the prevalence of diet-related non-communicable diseases. It's a massive issue in the UK, well, global UK, and particularly in Wales. You know, it's having serious impacts on individuals, families, communities, and the NHS as well. So if we want to get nutritious food into people, we need to be growing it. And to do that, we need healthy soil, which leads to healthy plants, healthy animals. We need to be thinking about raising food quality and also measuring crop quality according to nutrient density, and rewarding growers for growing in a regenerative manner, which will be improving population health.
My name's Jessie Kidd. I am the Education Officer for Kaitan CSA. And the reason I'm here is that I work with a lot of young people. So I run the Sustainable Schools programme, where I go in, and I've got a couple of aims to that programme. And one of the main aim is just to reconnect people, young people and their families, back to the land and their food. So there's a huge disconnect. And what I'm finding with the children that I work with is that they often say, oh, Bampy does this, or Grandad does this, or Granny grows this. But then they've lost the generation above them. We're losing their generation. So if we don't capture this now, it's going to cause a lot of problems, because the knowledge is still in the communities. It's still there, and we need that to feed back down. And another thing that we talk about a lot, and I'm very truthful with the children that I work with, you know, I talk a lot about the impact of their food choices. We talk a lot about carbon footprint. We talk about the carbon footprint of their school dinners. They look at the menu of their school dinner, and after they've sort of heard a few things, they're a little bit chucked. And one of the things that is most shocking is that most of them don't even know they have a vegetarian menu available to them. They don't even know.
I suppose I'd like to say, why am I here? As a potato grower in Pembrokeshire, supplying into the retail supply chain through Puffin Produce, there's a huge amount of pride that I can go into most supermarkets in Wales and see my potatoes there with my name on it. And even my local supermarket, the closest one to me, there are potatoes there. And when we talk about local food, it's an interesting debate, is how far do we as individuals drive to get to our local food, or does it get packaged up and hauled by some larger companies? And I think both systems work, and we shouldn't, I as a supplier into the large retail shouldn't diss the local people, because the local people are doing a phenomenal job. But I also think supplying into the large retailers, only in Wales currently, that what we're doing is supplying Welsh potatoes to Welsh consumers. A huge amount of pride when I get invited to go in and talk to schools, and that I talk about growing potatoes and that they can find what I produce locally. And so it's just there to say, we're here, we're trying to do our best, we're trying to do it sustainably. It's a learning journey. My father was here before me, and we're changing things that we do all the time on the farm. And if we don't have these conversations, we don't learn, we don't understand, and we don't move forward. But thank you very much.
Just really echoing a lot of what Walter's said there. I'm a dairy farmer from Pembroke. very proud of the product that we produce. We're a family farm, 350 cows, supplying milk locally and distributed locally. It always horrifies me when I sort of get in a community discussion like we've heard tonight. I've heard the words chemicals, pesticides, animal welfare. So, you know, I'm here, I'm very open. We can have that discussion, but I can promise you that on my in my business, those are top priorities, and look forward to sort of engaging with you all this evening.
So I work with Bank Organics. We grow veg over in Kidwelly. And I'm here really just to be part of the conversation, obviously, and learn from everybody here. I feel like we need to make good food accessible. It feels that it's, you know, we were talking about the nutrients in food and things like that. It's almost like it's something of a privilege to have food that is nutritious and good for you. And I think that really needs to change. And I think the part of the way we can do that is starting to take control of our stories and our narratives around food. So much of it at the moment is in the hands of corporations, in advertising, and so many people are enthralled to that. And I think if we don't take control of those narratives, then we're in danger of losing all of that knowledge that I think Jessie was talking about, that knowledge that we do have. I think especially in Wales, we've got quite a particular relationship with our land and with our history. And I think it's really the time now to harness that. There's obviously, with all the people here, there's so much momentum. So it just feels like a really good time to get moving.
Yeah, it's many levels. I think like everyone said, there's so many factors that go into this whole concept and what we're sort of talking about tonight. But in terms of my experience, I spent a long time in a job role for hospitality, building a Welsh menu that was launched really successfully. And since leaving, I've done work with a number of projects and just see more and more about the quality that is within Wales, but also the different pieces in the puzzle that need to be connected to make it effective, to make it consistent, and to grow sort of the public awareness around it. I was fortunate to speak to Simon, who's there tonight, and was on that video in one of the projects, and he echoed a lot of feedback that was coming in about awareness at school level, awareness of what is going into the supply chain, and really the quality that's around us, because I think when people have more awareness, but more importantly, more access to that through food and drink outlets, through supermarkets, it really is going to change behaviours, and I think that's fundamental. So this community approach is definitely the right way, in my opinion.
I sort of came back to Wales after living in Sri Lanka for many years to really reconnect with planet Earth a bit, to our family home here in Breakout, where we grow a lot of our own fruit and veg. It's really nice to have spent the last 2 years now almost sort of getting back into that. Couple of things that I think I'd echo. One is the privilege aspect to eating well, and how we get food into many mouths rather than just a few sort of Birkenstock wearing, you know, people who can afford good food. And something else that really interests me is how we protect ourselves from having left Brexit, the sort of lunacy of food deals from very far-flung places, which surely can't be carbon efficient. You know, can we legally find a way to prevent chickens having to come from New Zealand or something? You know, which is totally out of whack with the commitments we're making elsewhere on carbon pledges and things. So now, you know, local food is obviously the best way to go about that, but I wonder how we protect ourselves against the bottom line, super cheap mega deals that the government in Westminster wants to do with countries that are so far away from here.
So I asked you to consider what are the big challenges, and this was your opportunity to have a bit of a moan and a bit of a complain, and talk to each other about the big obstacles that we're facing, whether that's in our communities or the obstacles to accessing healthy food, or the obstacles to growing and producing healthy food, or running a business in the regional food sector. So again, please do put your answers to this question in the chat, but I'd also love to hear from you if you'd like to share with the group either any themes that emerged in your breakout rooms or what you think.
In our little breakout room, we've got 4 producers of food, which are all kind of using regenerative technique. So it's interesting to kind of hear similar challenges, but also quite different. Access to land, obviously, is a big one. Financial support from the government, that lost generation, the cost of good food just being too expensive for everyone to be able to enjoy. And then the lack of labour as well. But we've just noticed, all of us really, a lack of labour from the new generation, I guess. And then the cost of accommodation and then being able to work on your farm, or the cost of them being able to set up their own premises, their own kind of business, if it's producing food.
We talked a lot about money, actually, value and price and cost and inequality. And I think those are the crucial things in many ways, because you know, the cost of our food doesn't reflect its true cost, and we pay for it elsewhere, environment and in health. The value of food is not related to its quality, its nutritional quality. If we had the situation with, say, petrol, where you know a gallon of petrol, one garage is very cheap, would only take you half the distance to somewhere else, we'd realise the difference. We don't realise that within food, so that's really, really important. And I think one of the biggest challenges we face in this argument sometimes is the idea that we have to produce low quality, cheap food in order to feed the poorer parts of society, when that is just sustaining and in fact exacerbating inequality. The issue there is people being able to afford good, nutritious food, not the price of producing it. And that's one of the biggest issues that we face. And it's not acceptable to say we have to have industrialized food production of cheap, non-nutritious food in order to feed poor people. We really need to meet that argument head on, I think. And I think the other thing that came up, which is kind of associated to that, was education in terms of resilience. People being able to cook, understanding how to grow their own food. In times gone by, these were things that people could fall back on. When economic times were hard, it's impossible for us to. We've just seen over the last 18 months how the global economy can be ruptured at a moment's notice, and we need to have the resilience that you learn in terms of being able to cook your own food, grow it, and understand how to make the most of it is a tool that will be available to you in any economic circumstances, whatever we face in the future.
We were talking a bit about raising awareness and really getting out of the echo chamber. You know, how can we stop just talking to each other and getting out there to talk to people who maybe don't know what some of these words mean, and so on and so forth, and the challenge of doing that. And we were also talking about learning lessons from other places and ensuring that we think creatively. You know, people may not have space at home, may not have gardens. So, you know, can they do other creative ways like vertical farming at home and things like that? And then I think most of the other things that we were talking about in terms of affordability and convenience and all of those sorts of things that have already been spoken about.
We've got so used to fast foods and popping them to the supermarket, filling your basket with rubbish. That generation that has been used to that, which I'm not one, I'm past much before that. That's something that has to change, I think, and it's exacerbated by the kind of advertising that we get, which it doesn't help matters at all. And then availability I was concerned about. Because I don't drive, I can't get out to farmers markets and country fruit and veg stalls much as I'd like to. I need to pop down into town and have a good choice of local foods, from meat, from veg, from cakes and bread and biscuits in my local town. I think that's essential, because you've got to bring the food to the people. You can't, as I said, 25% of people in Wales don't have a car. So you need to bring food to the people.
I read some really interesting articles about addiction linked to kind of the climate crisis, actually. And it was interesting when you start thinking about your behavior as like one of addiction, you know, this very easy life that we basically have, which is related to our ease of access to huge, like phenomenal amounts of energy. And then when you start to look at it like that, you sort of think, well, how do we break addictions rather than how do we break habits? Because addictions are really hard to break.
In the past, perhaps it was food that we relied on, good quality, nutritious food to keep us healthy. And that's no longer the case. Ironically, it's literally the opposite, that many of the health problems that we face, particularly in the Western world, are food related. I think there's a real key link there between health and food, and looking for ways to switch things around from food having a negative effect on us to it having a positive effect on us.
One of the projects that I run is called Grow From Home. So as I said before, we work with 5 families and we enable them to grow their own food in their gardens. And none of these families had any prior growing experience. They're in very disadvantaged areas. And very, very quickly, with the support of us being there a lot, it took a lot of building those relationships. They're absolutely flying. You know, they're adding their own value. They're getting free greenhouses. They're putting up little polytunnels. They're finding extra compost. They've built new beds. They've been to the library. They're watching gardening programs. But what it takes is that person-to-person contact. You know, it takes someone to build trust, and that's what it takes on. And it's quite a small scale level as well. But also going back to health and food. At the moment, I'm trying to sort of reconnect with these families after the summer, and they're all really ill. They're all really poorly, the lot of them, the children, the adults, they've all got lots of different things. And my children, touch wood, they're never ill. They eat incredibly well. And I think, you know, the children that I work with in these projects, they're missing school, they're missing social opportunities, they're missing so much. And I often talk to the heads in the schools that I work with, and I said, if I had the money, I would love to test every single gut of the children in your school to see where that balance is, because I can assure you it's all off kilt, and all the large amount of behaviour that you're seeing that's inhibiting learning will come from their diet.
Yeah, building on what Jessie was just saying, then lack of community food skills, an opportunity here for campaign for home economics to be back on the curriculum as mandatory in primary and secondary, and then further then into employment opportunities across rural communities in Wales. The rise of diet-related disease. I personally would like to see some more social prescribing by proactive health boards, and health boards investing in the food in the community. Consumer demand and lack of consistent supply across the rural supply chain. You know, I think collectively we could work on a regional marketing campaign to address some of sort of private sector consumer habits. Environmental challenges, I'm sure we've all touched on, both positive and negative of sort of regional farming practices. And I think we need to take the skills, knowledge and experience of best practice across the region. And yeah, the quality of the food across the public plate. And yeah, we really need to tackle that as well. There's a lot of opportunity for there to have impact across economic, environmental challenges as well. Thank you.
Yeah, the public plate, schools, hospitals, what big organisations do about their food procurement. I think there are massive opportunities there, and some good things happening in the region, and opportunity to share best practice on that. Amazing. I think we've heard so many different voices already, covered a huge amount already this evening. So thank you all so much for your perspectives and for sharing so openly about what you feel are the real priorities and the real challenges that we could seek to tackle together collaboratively across South West Wales. A bit later than billed, I'm delighted to be able now to hand over to our one keynote speaker for this evening, and that is Patrick Holden, who is the chair of the Sustainable Food Trust. But not only that, he is a farmer in his own right. He's a dairy farmer in West Wales and has been for a long time, I think. So we're Really keen to hear from Patrick tonight about his background in farming, what the Sustainable Food Trust is all about. And as somebody who farms in our region, but with a kind of national perspective and obviously a key thought leader on the national stage about all of this, what does Patrick see as the key opportunities for South West Wales? So Patrick, are you there and are you able to talk to us for a few minutes?
Yes, I am. Is that all right? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Brilliant.
Yes, I'm on the farm, milked this morning. I'm milking for cheese making every day now, which is exciting because we haven't had enough milk to make every day. We've just gone every day. I must say, I'm not sure what I'm going to say until I say it, but just been listening to all the feedback from the breakouts. Really, there's so much wisdom that's just been shared. I don't know that I've got anything very profound to add. So I thought what I'd just do is start by talking about what it's like here, because it's quite strange sometimes to reflect that my life is so sort of embedded in the farm here. And I guess it's a sort of normality for us to farm in the way that we do. It's very important to remember, as I sometimes do, how different most people's lives are. But so I just thought I'd sort of give a little update on what the farm's like here. The statistics about the farm: we're farming 300 acres, of which more than half is rented. And we have a dairy herd of about 80 cows, Ayrshires and crosses. And we're trying to be completely self-sufficient in food, you know, practicing the principles of the circular economy, producing as much food as we can from this hill without buying in more than we have to. And that means all our grass and forage, our winter food, hay, haylage, silage, grains that we feed to the dairy cows, oats and peas which we grow, and tokenistically, although we used to be much more involved with vegetables than we are now, our own vegetables. So we quite often eat meals here which are entirely grown on this place, and what an incredible luxury and privilege it is to do that. I walked all around the farm today, and there's an incredible amount of grass. I guess that's partly to do with climate change and the weather this year. But we've got, in one of our fields, we've got 11 Ayrshire bulls, all under a year old, because we decided a couple of years ago that we wanted to not sell, or we certainly didn't want to let our male calves, dairy calves, die at a day old, which is what some dairy farmers do. But we thought we should rear them for kind of ruby veal. And we're doing that now. It's not very economic, but there's something rather wonderful about rearing animals, the male animals from the dairy cows, and then putting them into meat, which is sold at Watson and Pratt's, and also moving which is the Lambton shop, and also moving our heifers. We've got 3 batches of heifers. One lot are up in the Cambrian Mountains on some sort of I think it's some stewardship scheme where they've gone right up to the Eland Valley for 3 months, and they're coming back because we got a TB test, and they're way up in the wilds there, and apparently they're fine. We'll find out when we get back. And also, just something about cheese. We've got a couple of apprentices living here, and today, for the first time, they made cheese on their own, which is quite exciting. It's about 1,000 litres a day we're producing at the moment, and we're making all our milk into cheese on the farm. It's expensive, and that goes back to the points that Simon was just making. We cannot possibly compete with cheap industrial cheddar, which is sold in supermarkets. So they don't want to buy our cheese because it's too expensive. And that, of course, goes back to some of the comments that were made about the affordability of proper food. And I was very interested to hear the remarks that were made about health and children, because I think it certainly, our own boys, we've got 4 boys, only one of them's ever taken antibiotics, and the oldest is 20. And that was only, he took it because he got a burn at school or something. None of the others have ever taken antibiotics. And if you look at the health of our cows, I think if we get the farming and the nutrition right, health is the consequence. And our cows self-medicate, and they are healthy, and we hardly use any antibiotics, and we don't have much of a mastitis problem. It really does work. There is a remarkable, and I think obvious when you get to the feel of it, connection between diet and health. And that has so escaped the attention of the National Health Service, obviously, and governments. And we have to do something about that. So that's probably quite enough about the farm. I would say a little bit about my day job. We're working on a report where we're imagining the whole of the UK transition to regenerative farming, sustainable farming, whatever you want to call it, organic farming in our case. And we're modeling that with 4 different farming systems, one for sort of highlands and islands, very marginal land, which can only grow grass and then only extensively grazed. And then a step down, I guess it's kind of what we're farming. Of our land, we only grow 30 acres of crops a year because the rest is too fragile or wet or difficult to grow crops on. So it's grass, either temporary or permanent. And that would be another modeling system. And then come down again to more fertile land where you can grow a lot more crops, but still probably less than 50% of the area. And then the most fertile land, say in the east of England, which is currently continuous arable. For each of those farming systems, we're imagining it switched to regenerative farming. And then we're calculating the amount of food that would be produced under that regenerative system and the ratios between, you know, the grass-fed meat, the vegetables, the fruit, the grains, etc. And then we're totaling all that up and dividing it by 67 million to get, if you imagine, if you're asking the question, what should I eat to be healthy and sustainable? Well, our answer is, we should eat what the farmers of our regional country would produce if they switched to regenerative methods. So that leads to the second question, what is that? And the answer is, we don't know. So we thought, okay, we'll do a study on this. And we're in the concluding stages of this now. We're putting the report together. And a kind of preview of the headlines is that obviously, as everyone is talking about these days, if we switch to regenerative farming, we'd have a lot less meat, but it's only one type of meat we'd have less of, and that's cheap chicken and pork. And of course, dairy products from industrial dairy farms where the cows never get out. But actually, because the UK and Wales in particular is a nation of grass, 2/3 of the agricultural area, we'd have quite a lot of products from animals, whether they're beef or sheep or dairy cattle, fed on the grass that we grow so well. And so our diet, to support the sustainable farmers who want to transition, but at the moment are finding it difficult to do that, would consist of, yes, a lot more vegetables, yes, some grain, and grain production would actually halve in a regenerative system because you can't grow continuous grain crops in a regenerative system. You have to put half of the land into fertility building, which means they'll get more grass. That we need to eat those products because otherwise the farmers won't be able to transition. And that report's probably going to be published at the end of November, maybe early December. And I think it'll cause quite a stir because it's running contrary to what the Climate Change Committee are recommending for Wales and for England and the UK generally. It's running contrary to what the Eat Lancet report diet suggested, etc., etc. And we think it's obvious, but kind of novel, to say we should eat what farmers produce. And it's weird, quite weird that really nobody's done that before. So that's one thing I wanted to mention that we're doing. I'm going to Glasgow. I'm going to be there for the whole of the period. I just got asked to give 2 talks today, one on the role of livestock and sustainable farming systems, and another one on true cost accounting, which has just been mentioned. I do think that the absence of true cost accounting is a massive barrier to change. And until we make the polluter pay and redirect the subsidies, on the subject of which, let's hope the Welsh government get their act together and launch this new sustainable farming scheme, because that's the carrot. If the carrot is, if you farm sustainably, you get more money from the single farm payment replacement, that's going to help. But we also need to make the polluter pay. And of course, the Welsh government are wanting to make the whole of Wales a nitrate vulnerable zone, which seems to be completely sensible, because it's all about really how you farm is how much nitrogen or livestock manure you produce, and there need to be limits, because at the moment many farmers in Wales exceed what the carrying capacity of the land is. And I think that the challenge that should confront every Welsh farmer in the future is, how much food can I grow from the natural capital that I'm farming without becoming umbilically dependent on outside inputs. Another thing that I'm going to be talking about at Glasgow is the idea of a trade agreement, a new international trade agreement, where only regenerative, sustainable, organic food would be traded tariff-free, and all the other food which caused environmental damage or climate change would incur tariffs which were linked to the monetized cost of the damage done. And of course, in order to do that, you need an international way of measuring the impacts of farming systems. And that's another project that the Sustainable Food Trust is working on, what we're calling a global farm metric. So if a farmer in Wales would undertake a sustainability audit every year, or a grower, and that audit would measure soil, water, biodiversity, social and cultural impacts, livestock health, crop health, nutrient cycling, everything. And it would use common systems of measurement, common units of measurement, so that you could then have that sustainability audit and go to a farmer in another country, and you'd be able to compare your score, your sustainability score with them. And you could say to the farmer, what's your soil score out of 10, say, and they could say it's 6.7 and I'm building carbon or whatever. And if we had that common language, then farmers could be paid to look after the carbon they've got in their grasslands or wherever, or to build more. And the idea, I think, of farmers being paid to be carbon stewards would be one of the main ways in which you could really transform the economics of regenerative and sustainable agriculture. And one other thing I wanted to talk about from my sort of day job, as it were, is multinational food companies and retailers. There's a lot of negativity about big food companies, and understandably so, because they are so much part of the problem at the moment. For instance, you can't easily go to any supermarket and buy good food. That's, in my opinion, food meaning that nutrient dense, locally produced, ideally coming from a named farm, certainly produced in Wales, and properly grown, hopefully certified, or at least with a known sustainable farming system. If you have that as your kind of prescription for buying when you go around a supermarket, there are incredibly few products you can buy that meet all those criteria. So that has to change. But what I think is really interesting about COP26 and climate change and whether we can do enough in time is that it's very, very unlikely that local food systems from the ground up, the sort of things that we're all doing, are going to be able to replace the present highly centralized industrial food model in the time available. So in that context, I think it's interesting that Nestle made a big announcement, not last week, but the week before, basically saying we're going to go regenerative. And a lot of people said, oh, there's just typical big food company greenwash crap. You know, they're not going to really do it. But imagine if they were measuring their sustainability impacts with this global farm metric, then that would be completely transparent what they did. And then they wouldn't be able to practice greenwash. And I think what is really interesting is that the chief executives of Nestle, when they were on this call that I was invited on, they said, when they were asked, you know, what would regenerative food systems look like with Nestle involved, they said, we don't know, because the systems of farming, they're going to replace the ones that we're sourcing from at the moment, are so different because they're going to be diverse enterprises, and we're going to have to relocalize, we're going to have to put new infrastructure in. We don't even know either what the systems of food production are going to look like, they're going to replace the ones we've got at the moment, or what the distribution systems are going to be. So that struck me that it makes it all the more interesting what we are doing in Southwest Wales, because we are in a way creating a new map of how to get farm products from growers to the people that want to eat them in an efficient way, which doesn't cause more emissions and which makes food accessible without having to have a car and all the things that already come up. And the truth is, we are co-creating a new map. Oh, I see there's a Labour question. I'll come to that in a second. We're creating a new map of our food system, distribution, processing, etc. And it's a map which doesn't exist at the moment. I mean, we can have clues from the past, and some of us are already doing stuff which is really brilliant. But if you imagine the whole of the farming systems of Wales or anywhere else transitioned, nobody really has any idea exactly what those farming systems would look like. So I think I should probably end on that, but just I'll answer that question about labour. We've had huge problems with finding labour. We've got these 2 apprentices who made cheese today, and that's great, but we cannot find anybody to milk our cows. And I went to look in Whitland just last week at a robot system. And I was always very skeptical about robots because I thought, well, first of all, it's a recipe for keeping cows inside, and we pride ourselves on having a mainly grass-fed herd, and we love them to walk to grass for 6 months of the year or more if the weather permits. But we've had 3 herds people, all men as it happened, who didn't work out. And I currently, and me and Becky are doing 10 out of 14 milkings, and I've got a day job and all the rest of it. And and I'm 71. So it seems to me that the issue of getting people in general, and young people in particular, to get back on the land and do meaningful work and be properly rewarded for it financially, etc., is a huge issue at the moment. And I don't know what the answer is. And in relation to tech and robots, a friend of mine said, I went to see a robot the other day, and I was really trying to hate it. And I found myself rather liking it. And I suppose the reason why he said that is because cows are more in control when they have a robot. And my big worry was whether they could walk a long way to grass. And this particular farm, which is near Narberth, the cows were walking over a mile to grass, and the guy was still making it work. So I don't know. We might get a robot. It'll cost about £120,000 to get one and fit it all in and everything. And I love milking, but I can't go on forever. And we can't get people who want to milk cows and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's a discussion point. But I do think, in conclusion, that this group is doing great things, sharing amazing wisdom, and actually co-creating the future food systems that we need in South West Wales. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak.
Thank you, Patrick. You've certainly sort of given us some food for thought and some good talking points there. I'm really interested in this conversation about robots. We talk about lots of industries automating more and more of their work. And then you always think about the impact on jobs and livelihoods of that. And I take Vicky's point and yours from the chat that the robots perhaps put the cows in control of when they're milked. But surely there is a real opportunity for our regional, local economies to create more jobs. So there may be some jobs on the farm that maybe the direction of travel is robots. I mean, I accept that. But, you know, surely there's a huge, foundational economy and all of that, the opportunities for young people to get into careers that they're not considering at the moment and bring those jobs back into rural areas.
Yeah, and I think all this stuff in the news at the moment about not being able to get, you know, people who pack industrial pork or work in abattoirs or pick, you know, fields of soulless broccoli or whatever it is in those eastern counties where it's just vegetable monocultures. It's not surprising that young people don't want to work in those systems because they are just basically factories. So what we need is to offer work which is diverse, which is economically reasonably rewarding and culturally rich. And I think that's the kind of farming and food systems we need in the future. And we need to persuade young people that is a career option, and let's hope we can.
I mean, some of these things are really controversial, aren't they? So we think about a climate-friendly diet, and a lot of people in tonight's meeting will think that means a vegan diet. And increasing numbers of people have been going vegetarian and going vegan. But you make a really important differentiation, I think. It's important to consider what sort of meat we're eating rather than to cut meat out of our diets.
Yeah, well, I'll just say a couple of words about that. And I'm being deliberately slightly controversial. I think that the plant-based diets movement, particularly all the NGOs that have signed up to this Eating Better coalition, frankly, have served to confuse the public even more than they were before about what to eat to be sustainable and healthy. Because we ought to, if we're trying to answer that question, we should be as tough on the plants as we are on the animals. It's completely illogical to just say, oh, give up eating meat when you cannot turn 2/3 of the agricultural area of the UK and more than that in Wales into food that we can eat without ruminant animals. So what about the palm oil? What about the GM soy? We need to say we need to eat plants and animals from sustainable sources and be equally tough on the systems behind those productions as we are on both the plant and the animal kingdoms. And I think that this obsession with plant-based diets is stupid, because basically you can't grow plants. If you grow a crop of barley or a crop of vegetables, it's ecologically really challenging and it depletes fertility. So you have to have, if you're going to move to biologically based farming, you have to have a rotation which includes a fertility building phase. Of course, we should eat less meat in the form of cheap chicken from industrial horrible factories and pork and dairy cows that never get out. But actually, if we want to support the regenerative farmers, which we need now to address all the issues, we need to eat their food. And a lot of them are going to be producing grass-fed and mainly grass-fed lamb, beef and dairy. And if we have ethical objections to eat it, then if we don't eat it, then they can't switch to regenerative farming. So it's not that, of course, it's great to eat plants, but let's make sure those plants come from sustainable systems, not vegetable chemical monocultures, which are nutrient deficient. So let's just be equally tough on the plant transition as well as the animal transition. That's my message. And of course, our diets report is going to be shedding some light on this. Yes, of course, and somebody's saying there's grass-fed chicken and eggs too. We don't have to give up all chicken. We can have it as it was in the 50s and 60s, once a month as a treat. But don't forget, chickens do need to eat some grain, mostly, unless you've got an enormous amount of scraps. And so therefore, actually, chicken needs to be expensive and a treat. The staple meat is grass-fed beef and lamb, and yes, offal too, because that's very nutrient rich.
And of course, in South West Wales, we have some amazing farmers doing amazing things. And the NFU, the National Farmers Union, have made great commitments to more regenerative agriculture, but also zero carbon. Do you think the support is there to help farmers make the transition? And do you see good practice happening? We hear really great stories of farmers doing amazing things, as you are on your farm, and really leading the way in this. Do you think there's a positive story to tell?
I think in their hearts, nearly all farmers in Wales would like to farm in a more nature-friendly way. But unlike me, who's got the luxury of a day job, they've got to make it pay. And at the moment, let's be honest, if you use nitrogen fertilizer and you do other things which are relatively intensive, you're going to make more money than if you farm as we are farming. So we have to change that. And you can't blame the farmers. They've just become commodity slaves. They're trapped by an economic system which rewards, intensification and cheapness and doesn't reward farming in harmony with nature. So that's what we can do. We can make sure that both as citizens, as to electing politicians, as consumers of food, we help the farmers make the transition that they probably want to make. I mean, which farmer can possibly enjoy milking 1,000 cows in a factory or pouring on pesticides onto their land? I don't think they enjoy it. They're just following the money. And I think they know the change is coming now. And I think the NFU Cymru are wanting to lead that change. Obviously, they're in a difficult position because they have loads of farmer members and some of them are intensive pig and chicken farmers, but most of them would like to change. So we need to co-create an environment which will enable them to change.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and insight with our meeting this evening. It's been really interesting to talk to you. Some controversial points, but that's great. And I'm sure there'll be...
Apologies for my upsetting when I didn't mean to.
No, I'm sure. There's plenty of opportunity tonight for everyone to share different perspectives. So we're really looking forward to that. So we just really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your story and your perspective. Someone's asking whether you have a book. I don't know whether you've written a book.
I'm trying to write a book. I'm trying to write two.
All right.
I just can't get it together, but I'll try harder now.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Lovely to talk to you. I'll let you go. So that was Patrick Holden from the Sustainable Food Trust, and I'm sure you'll agree, very thought-provoking, and his passion for the changes that are needed in the food system and in our region, and the opportunities for Wales to lead the way really comes through in everything that Patrick says. One of the things that Patrick mentioned when I first spoke to him was that we all have an opportunity to use our power as citizens and as shoppers to make change possible. And that comes down to the individual choices that we make when we're shopping for our food, whether that's in the supermarket. And as he says, sometimes there's not much choice, although you can get your puffin produce potatoes in most places, or whether we're lucky enough to be able to go to farmers markets or local producers to buy locally produced food. But one of the challenges that Patrick gave me when I had first spoke to him, I'm going to now give to you. So the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to play a video from CK's supermarket, which some of you will know is a Swansea-based small chain of supermarkets. They've made a really nice video about their local suppliers, and it's about 7 minutes long. So I'm going to play that video, and that's going to serve as a sort of comfort break interval. But while you're doing that, here is the challenge. Go to your fridge or your cupboard and find an item of locally produced food. Have a look. Have you got something that's been produced in our region? Is there something that you've picked up recently that you know is locally sourced, locally produced? And probably there are stories behind all those items, why you love them, why you buy them. This will be a challenge for some and it will be easy for others. But there is the challenge. I'd like you to go and grab an item of locally produced food from your fridges and cupboards and bring it back with you.
Well, I've been lucky enough to travel all over the world with my refereeing, but since handing up the whistle, this is my day job. I'll tell you one thing, I'm working harder now than I've ever done. But one of the good things about being home is I get to enjoy all the local produce, which of course is all produced here locally. And lovely it is as well. Ah, hynny, mêl.
Shwmai.
Shwmai.
Wel, mêl blodau gwyllt Cymru sydd da ni fan hyn. Ti wedi trio mêl o blaen?
I don't enjoy mêl. I love enjoy mêl ydw.
Wel, beth ti'n meddwl o fe? Wedi ti roi peth yn y troli na wedyn? Ti llwyd yna I ti?
Diolch. Yn cael mêl, y tost yn bore, ti'n bod.
Ti?
Beautiful.
Ei, dim yn ama ti'n try before you buy.
No, you're on. Before you buy. Right then. That's very nice. Ah, cheese. Now then, I love my cheese.
This is Caws Cynath cheese, based in West Wales. We've been going for 30 years. We've been supplying CKs for about 15 of those years. Pearl Lass here, which is our flagship product, our best seller.
Oh, cut, like blue cheese? Yeah, cut a piece and a taste then.
This has won numerous awards. There's a show called the International Cheese Awards.
I wasn't a big fan of blue cheese, but
That's because it's mild, isn't it?
Well, I'll take it, fill my trolley up with a couple then, is it?
You have that one too, yeah.
Ah, totally Welsh. So where do you get your milk from? Is it off local farms?
So all of our milk is collected from the farm, bottled in our factory and then put into the CK stores within 48 hours of leaving.
Oh, well, that is real fresh milk then. No, is this the salty butter? Oh, now then. I'm going to put some of this in my trolley now already. I'm going to take a bit of these with me. Oh, you've got to have this with your cereal. Full fat. Now then. Ah, now then. One of the essentials of shopping are my favourite food, eggs.
Mine too, actually.
Yeah, well, I bet they are because you're selling them. So everything free range, yeah?
Yes, all free range, Welsh and completely certified farms as well.
How long have you been supplying CKs then?
Oh, we've been supplying CKs, I think, about 10 years.
Oh, right.
We have a really good relationship with CKs and they're fabulous to us as well.
How do you like your eggs, favourite?
Well, I'm partial to a scramble, me.
Are you? In between a fried and a boiled, but I'd probably go for a nice soft boiled egg.
Soft boiled egg, yeah.
Piece of toast with some lovely, totally Welsh salted butter on it. Right then. Oh, I can take some eggs, can I?
Yeah, help yourself.
I think I'll take some of these recyclable ones. Lovely. Diolch yn fawr.
Croeso.
Right, hwyl fawr. Now then, I've got a bit of a sweet tooth. Bara, Breath and Welsh Cakes. Can't go wrong.
So we got our Welsh Cakes, our famous Welsh Cakes.
Yeah, they are very famous, aren't they?
The company's been going for about 20 years.
How did it start then?
Started from a small farm in Narber.
On an Arga. I think I was about 2 when it started.
No, will you?
I was indeed.
There's a moisture line in the middle. Not a lot of Welsh Cakes.
Oh, that's my favourite bit, that is.
Yeah.
I think I better take a couple with me then, is it?
Yeah, you best do. Best have enough for a week.
Get a bit of beef in here. And I'll take a couple of Welsh Cakes. Oh, it's like being in heaven, your ice cream now.
Actually, Nigel, it's gelato.
Oh. This is slightly different to ice cream.
What's the difference then?
A lower cream content, so much better for you. It's made on the Gower Peninsula using local milk from totally Welsh, in fact.
All right.
We even make a lactose-free version for your dogs. There we are, no problem at all.
Every day's a learning day. And how long have you been supplying CKs then?
For just about a year now.
Oh, because this is quite new then, isn't it?
It is. We've been in business for 2 years.
Well,
I hope you enjoy.
I am. I'm going to have some gelato now.
Perfect.
No ice cream, gelato. Oh, I bet you this is a popular place in the summer now. Yeah? The beer stand. This is all locally made, is it?
It is. It's made in Crofty on the Gower.
Okay.
We've been supplying CKs now for nearly 10 years.
Have you?
Yeah. One of our original was the Gower Gold.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. I've had a few with that, yeah.
Our second following is our Lighthouse Lager.
No, come here, let me show you now. Come here. Let's do it behind the bar, see? You've got to go. See? That's how you do it, see?
What do you think of that? You haven't tasted our lager before, really?
That's nice. That is very nice. Got a nice little light, fresh taste to it, isn't it? Yeah. The strawberry's getting full, yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Oh, what's this here then?
Oh, those are Bury Estuary cockles, Nigel. The best cockles in the UK.
Well, they're all empties and they must be good. This is all local, obviously, so where?
All gathered from our beautiful Bury inlet.
Ah, okay, is that
we have lava bread, about allowed.
Ah, now then I've heard a lot about this. And what else have you got here then? So you've got lava bread?
We have our cockles.
Cockles, yes, yeah.
Cooked by ourselves, third generation of the Jones family.
Is it?
Produced the Selwyns, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, they're fresh?
Yeah, nothing else but our beautifully sweet cockles in there. You can add some vinegar to them if you like, or you can cook them, as you said, with some lava bread and streaky bacon.
So these are ready to eat now then? They are. Okay, and how long have you been supplying CKs and stuff then?
We've been supplying CKs now for around 3 years.
Oh, right then, I look forward to tasting these now. Mewn help fe'n na fi. Right, diolch yn fawr, thank you. Ah, Nerys. Cooking lava bread?
Not lava bread today.
It doesn't look like lava bread,
no lava bread today. These are CK sausages, and so we've got loads of sausages and burgers, and they're made obviously by CK's butchery themselves.
Oh, do they make them themselves, do they?
They make them themselves.
Oh, right.
And I've got bread from the bakery, CK's bakery. Would you like to try some?
I will, yes please, yeah. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I like some onions, yes please, yeah.
Only then. Oops.
Oh.
Careful, it's going to be hot.
Now then. Ooh, now then. I should be doing mal ama. Those sausages are very tasty too. Is it the way they're made or the way they're cooked?
A bit of both.
And these burgers, they make their own?
They make their own burgers as well. Yeah, all the meat in the butchery is made in Llanelli, just outside Llanelli here.
Huh?
Back her in, love it.
Yeah. This trolley's getting full now. Oh. Well, that was hard work, but very enjoyable. I got to say, great produce all the local companies are supplying CKs with, I got to say. Very interesting.
Nigel, you look like a man who needs a nice cup of Welsh brew tea.
Yes, I've been waiting for the last hour, have you been?
Have a drink on me.
Okay, thank you.
Whoa, Nigel, you forgot about the world famous CK's custard slice. Help yourself.
Just one big slice, is it? Oh no, you cut them. Ooh.
Nice, isn't it?
Beautiful. Very nice. I wonder they're world famous.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully you've had a chance for a little comfort break, and hopefully you've been able to find some amazing regional produce in your fridges and cupboards. I'll go first. My favourite thing at the moment is this sauerkraut that I managed to buy at the Uplands Farmers Market. It's made by a local company. It's called Good For You Ferments. And I'm addicted to it, talking about addictions.
Leonie's showing she's got the same.
Oh, snap. Snap, Leonie, yeah. So I think this is good for my gut biome as well. I think sauerkraut's supposed to be really good for us. So I have this on the side of every meal. And then I'm also lucky enough to be signed up to Farmco and their veg boxes, and they've started delivering. So I've got amazing chorizo from Merthin Heritage and courgettes, which I suppose they grow locally, but that all comes in my Farmco box every week. So that's me.
in line with Monty Don, who apparently said that if you want your tomatoes to ripen, this is the last week of doing them, so you need to go down and take all the leaves off them. So that's what I did this afternoon. I took the leaves off my tomatoes. I went and collected them, and I will eat them with some Thelma's Caerphilly and some good local sourdough, and it's a meal fit for a king.
So I've got these delicious apples that I collected with the local community project called, oh bear with me, Cyfoeth y Coed, Riches of the Forest. But we went along, and the children helped pick fruits that were going to spoil, and as volunteers we were able to take some of those home, and we'll be making delicious apple crumble with those.
This is a bottle of milk from my local milkman who has a farm about 4 miles from my house, and he delivers every day. And they're glass bottles which are put out, and he takes them back and they get reused. His herd lives out most of the year on grass. It has a mixture of Jersey, Guernsey and dairy shorthorns.
I can't help being curious about what Judy Bruce is holding up there.
I'm sure everybody's extremely familiar with this if they do any gardening at all. It's one of those courgettes which was meant to be 6 inches long and was hiding under the leaves and ended up as a marrow. But it is from my garden, and though I'm not at all an expert gardener, I did manage to get some courgettes, and I've got some leeks and chard and things like that.
And so this milk is from a mile up the road. And it's an example of robotic milking when it's grass-fed and they wander in to be milked when they want to. It's a young farmer, young children, good friend, and it's really nice to hear his story. And these are just beans from the garden, which I'm sort of dealing with now for supper as I listen to this.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a cinch, but in actual fact, when I came to it, there's only some things from my garden and some of this jam that we bought locally that she produced in Kidwelly. So yeah, really quite sort of disappointed, really.
Oh, thank you for being honest. Yeah, it's not that easy.
Definitely a favourite of ours. It's the Little Valley Bakery.
Yes, it's in here are 2 vegan sausage rolls, and I've got my freezer's got their bread in. It's just round the corner now. And it's just such wonderful bread and cakes. So it's lovely having a local baker to go to.
Yeah, a real local baker. Amazing. Thank you, Sue.
Some wonderful rainbow chard, which we started growing veg on the farm in May this year. And we're now up to, this will be one of about now 20 products that we're now selling to local shops, restaurants and so on. So no, it's great to be having such fabulous food grown on the farm again, because my husband's family were growing veg here back 40 years ago and it all stopped, and so we've reintroduced that onto the farm just this year, and it's part of our effort to become more diverse in what we're doing. So it's all grown organically and tastes fab.
Yeah, just a couple of things then. Milk, that's from the vending machine on the farm about 2 miles away from where I'm sat now. I've got some, don't know whether you can see them, some green beans.
Oh, yeah.
These are grown in a polytunnel by a neighbour. This apple was grown on the orchard, literally a stone's throw away. So I've got dragon cheese, which comes from North Wales, Plum Peninsula, I think. And then more local, I've got this plum and apple chutney, which was made by a friend of mine, Sean, in return for me giving her a bag full of apples from my garden.
I can't show you because if I carry it, it'll be everywhere. I made a huge pan of soup from carrots that I was given free from a local farm because they weren't good enough to sell anywhere. They were all marked and bubbled and whatever. So I made an enormous pan of soup out of free carrots.
I've got some stuff that I've grown. So courgettes, apples, tomatoes, green beans. What else we got? Oh, and potatoes, loads of potatoes. And then I also found a bottle of Welsh wine.
Oh,
which is it's from Powys, so not too far away.
Oh, well done, thank you. Okay, that was really nice. Anybody else waving at me with any stories you'd like to share? I think what was really nice actually from that little array of us all showing off about our locally produced or locally grown food is a few different themes came out. So I talked about farmers market, and there are others talking about local shops. We heard about local milk delivery and local milk vending machines. And then we heard a lot about homegrown stuff, but also sharing with neighbours and sharing in the community and passing food. That when we've got a glut of something and we can share it with our neighbours, I mean, that's just amazing. So really great, lots of different ways that we can get our hands on locally produced food. But perhaps like me, that you felt looking in your fridge and your cupboards that you wished there was more that was sourced locally. So that is the challenge. And of course, somebody's mentioned it already, but are we all in a bubble where we're the ones that really care about where our food comes from, and we make that extra effort and we have those connections? I wonder whether we're representative of the population at large. I fear that we might not be. So into the next breakout room next, and I'd like you to think about what would be your 3 wishes. So if I had a magic wand and could grant you 3 wishes in relation to our regional food system, what does success look like? What would you love to see? What are your 3 wishes?
We had quite a big group, so I'll just pick a couple which kind of jumped out. Someone said demonetization of food, not-for-profit systems where we kind of feed communities and have a different outlook on food. And another one said, all schools adopting farms, but there would be more of a direct link between farms and schools, and everyone was really passionate about education. So that would be a cool way to do it.
More local food partnerships. And then there are some good examples like Food Cardiff and the Sustainable Food Places project, and here in Aberystwyth wanting to get a sort of food network together. And an example of that is that our community garden has entered a sort of Tesco's funding thing, which means that we're pitted against other projects, and we're all supposed to compete for the for the funding that Tesco may deign to give us. And I think this way that the community groups are sort of set against each other and supposed to compete, when actually we could be working together. We could be telling Tesco, look, this is our local food strategy. If you want to support food in Aberystwyth, you work with us. You don't sort of throw a few crumbs on the floor and then let us scramble for them. So I'd like to see more dignity and more self-determination in local areas.
We would like to see more gardens and allotments and land, access to land as a human right. Yeah. Gardens and allotments is even more common than car parks are now. So they're everywhere, with access for everybody. Yeah. Another thing was food production in various forms, cooking that food, and that should be taught at all ages, all through school, so it becomes part of your life, not just an add-on. Empty shops, in towns, of which there are thousands, turned into farmers markets so that they're easily accessible to everybody, and it would cost far less than having a shop because you'd only be paying for your store within a large shop. And then more government support for small growers. We would like to see the government's greasing the wheels and not making people jump through hoops and having to buy the things they don't want. It should be made easier for them to buy the things that they do want.
We had more of the kind of things in schools like gardens, growing, that sort of thing. Also, we spoke about keeping bees and insects, and also just fish, because Wales has got a lot of good quality sea around it. But when we ask our local fish delivery guy, like, where does the fish come from? It's actually quite hard to establish whether it's come actually out of the waters here or whether it's brought from fishing trawlers miles away.
Can I come back on what one of your previous speakers said about connection with schools? Fully support that. But I'll just tell you my experience as a president of Rotary Club in Haverfordwest a few years ago. We went out with a major competition to all the elementary schools in Pembrokeshire with 4 prizes of £500 each. So they were substantial prizes. And we asked them to write up about local food, what they saw, how it was produced, etc., etc. And we actually only got 3 schools taking part out of something like 67 schools. And the answer we got from many of the teachers was, sorry, our curriculum's full, we haven't got time to do this, etc., etc.
So one of the things I think that we should be doing, if we're being really aspirational, is just really to tell children the truth about their food production, the truth is, so when I talk to children about, lots of people have talked about the holistic side of teaching, about education, about, pollination and things like that. And I do it all through games, and it's loads of fun. But these, when I talk about pesticide use and chemical use and how that impacts on the bees and how that, we talk very, very loosely, but I do talk to 7-year-olds about bioaccumulation. They can get these big terms, a 7-year-old can reel off a number of dinosaurs with 20 letters in, so they can understand bioaccumulation. So when you talk to them about this, the questions that they come back to me with just break my heart. They're just asking, so why do you allow your food to be covered in chemicals then that we eat? Why do you allow some animals to be treated this badly? Why, and I really struggle to answer their questions.
One was getting not just getting more money in people's pockets through a living wage, but also having a well-being economy so that we've all got more time. And the fact that we're also short on time means that we're all encouraged to have fast food and do things that are convenient and various other things. So there's a nice organisation called For the Region that's run some conferences on wellbeing economy, so you should have a listen to their sessions on that. The second one, which I've put in the chat, is just having, at the moment, we publicise the costs and we privatise the benefits, and we need to flip that model around. So it should cost you more to eat unhealthy and unsustainably, and it should be cheaper to eat healthily and sustainably, which is not to say that it should cost, the producers should get less. It just means that, it should cost a lot more if we're going to be unsustainable. And the third one then was just, I struggle to find a word in for this, but just a more sensible system where you don't have something that's grown down the road that then goes halfway around the country, or worse, halfway around the world, and then ends up back on your plate, and just shortening that system. I'd love to say I've got the answers to all 3 of those, but anyway, those are my wishes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's something, isn't there, about how busy modern life is, how hard people work, how long their hours are, that we haven't got that time to connect with food in different ways. So that's certainly interesting point raised there. Thank you, Ben. And Ben runs a number of farmers markets across the region, so really well connected with amazing local food producers across South West Wales.
Extra bit I wanted to put in was with children and the huge success we had of Cows on Tour in 2019, which was a project started here in Fishguard and went round Wales with cows going to a central point and all sorts of other agricultural products, live sheep, etc. And it went extremely well. And one of the experiments that they did was to have some bottles of cream and little phials like that, which they filled up with the cream, gave them to the children and said, now shake it as hard as you can, keep shaking. And they made butter to put on their biscuits. And that went down extremely well.
If we've got issues potentially with homelessness and access to food and things, I would love nothing more than to have a community orchard. I don't potentially need to maintain it that much. I may well be very ignorant of this, and I'm really sorry. But yeah, find me stuff which will just grow with the minimum of input and things, and support tiny things like, a couple of apples off a tree that's surplus, things like that. So yeah, I'd love to see bits like that where we just sort of use every tiny little second that we've got.
I felt that the richness of the ideas here are so powerful that if only we could have decision-making powers and we should use deliberative democracy so that makes sure every sector affected by the decision is properly represented, and we could be informed and then come to decisions together. And if governments would say, here's the rule book, you decide, we'll just rubber stamp it up, just make sure there's nothing crazy there. I think that would be the lever we seek to transform, because there's such a richness of ideas, and other ones should only be put in the chat so far. So deliberative democracy to create the changes we're talking about.
I would just love the government to support healthy, reward healthy lifestyles, make people aware that we're responsible for our own health, and that includes local good food, real food. So that was one. One was learning from the best around the world about local growing, and so rehabilitating all the unused polytunnels around Swansea, growing diverse ranges of food, community-supported agriculture, young people training up, like just this whole thing about we can grow amazing food locally all year round. The Dutch grow 2.5 times more food than they need every year, so why can't we do a bit of that? And finally, a little vertical garden for every home, so that you could have your own herbs and your own fresh salad leaves, and just free for everybody to have one, designed along sort of clear principles about making it really easy to look after them. There's lots of knowledge out there. We just need to bring it together and roll it out, use the resources around us like old pallets and so on. So yeah, my dream.
High quality, local and regeneratively produced food becomes the norm rather than the exception. For Swansea and each of the 4 counties to become sustainable food places, where regenerative food systems are at the heart of our communities. And that all citizens have a bionutrient meter app on their phone, so that they can determine how nutrient dense their veg and fruit is prior to purchase. And for growers to measure their crops to ensure that they're growing nutrient dense foods and getting rewarded for it because they're improving population health. So that's my 3 wishes.
Rhiannon mentioned in our group about developers, and there's so many new houses going up and developers are taking up all the land, and actually developers should be looking at creating space for people to grow within these developments. And it reminded me that we had an email from a local developer that we're connected with, that they do exactly that. So instead of grassing the gardens, they create allotments within the houses, which I haven't heard of before, and I think it's a fantastic idea.
I think there's a good important point there. If you are in the Goodwick area west of Fishguard and you see some of the houses that were built in the 1950s, they're worth buying if they ever come for sale, because they've got massive gardens. They've got garden plots of sort of 100 foot behind them. And a lot of people do grow stuff there.
They used to do it much better. We talked a bit earlier on about the skills that we've lost, and how in the olden days everyone had an allotment and everyone knew how to grow these things. And speaking for myself, I really have not got that knowledge, but I've also been inspired tonight by everybody's homegrown produce, and I'm sure I could do better. A big thank you to everyone who's taken part tonight. Come back again tomorrow, 10 till 1, even if you can't stay for the whole thing, join when you can. It's exactly the same Zoom link as you've used tonight, so no change there. And we will look forward to seeing you in the morning. In the meantime, have a good night's sleep. And thank you all very much for being part of this meeting. Bye for now.
Thank you, Dawn and Zoe. It's been brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Lovely to see you. Good night.
Nasta.
Nasta. Good night.